So today we can finally talk about Helix Stadium XL. I've had my unit for a little over a month now, and I've actually already let you hear it on the channel. If you watched my Strandberg video from a few weeks ago, you have heard the Stadium XL. All the tones in that video were this thing. In fact, they were all stock presets. And specifically for the last week and a half, I have been up in my home studio dialing in my own presets and my own sounds in the new Helix Stadium because I'm gonna take this on tour. This is gonna be my fly rig in January when I go to Asia with the Midnight. So in today's video, we're gonna talk about all that stuff. I'm gonna show you the good stuff, the bad stuff, what I honestly think about the Helix Stadium XL, and why I've decided to make this my fly rig for next year. This video is gonna get pretty in-depth and in the weeds in some parts. So I will have chapter markers down below. If you're just looking for one specific thing, or you just wanna hear some sounds, chapter markers are down below. But before we get into all that, let's hear what this thing sounds like. Okay, so before we dive in and start to get into the nitty-gritty details here, a few quick disclaimers. Line 6 did send me this unit for free. I reached out to them a while ago and asked if I could have early access to the Stadium XL because I was thinking this might be a good option for me to take on the road next year. They agreed and got me this early access unit, and like I said, I've had it for a little over a month. They're not gonna see this video before it goes live. These are my honest and open opinions, but in full transparency, I have not paid for this unit. So this video is not sponsored by Line 6, but it is sponsored by my video courses. I have 2 video courses in a bundle that you might want to check out. The tone course and the amp course. The tone course is my sort of fundamental approach to electric guitar tone. It starts at the very beginning, the source, which is the guitar. We go in depth into things like pickups, body construction. Then we take a look at tube amps, talking about some basic concepts like EQ, gain staging, dialing in different types of sounds with different amplifiers. We take a look at speakers and speaker cabinets and how they affect your overall tone. And then we look at the basic effects. These are sort of your core food groups of effects. We talk about effects stacking, getting some different types of sounds, from great lead sounds and rhythm sounds to ambient stuff and everything in between. And then the amp course takes some of those concepts that we talked about in the tone course and goes even deeper, specifically around tube amps. We go in depth into the construction, the signal flow of an amplifier, different amp types, gain staging, EQ, dialing in different types of sounds. And then we take all of those concepts and apply them to the modeler. That's what's so cool about all these digital options today, is that the core fundamental ideas, sort of the theory, if you will, works in the digital realm. It doesn't matter what type of modeler you're using, whether it's a Helix or Quad Cortex or something else, these concepts all work and all apply. So to find out more information about what's included in the bundle and to get 50% off both courses, click the link in the description box down below. This is a great way to support my channel if you like what I'm doing here, and I appreciate it. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about the Helix. So truth be told, I have struggled with this video for a few days because there's so much to talk about here that I've kind of struggled to decide what to put in and what not to put in. Like, if I talked about every single thing I wanted to in this video in detail, this would be over an hour long. So here's what we're gonna do. This video is gonna be sort of the general overview, the thoughts, the initial review, and who I think this is for and what I'm going to be using this for. Sort of my plan for the Helix Stadium XL in the foreseeable future. And then in the coming weeks here on the channel, I'm going to be making more videos going in depth and more detail into some other aspects of this unit that I want to talk about. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe down below for that kind of stuff. There's a few reasons for this, but chief among them is there's some core features that will be available soon that aren't now. With the 1.1 firmware that's launching, there's things like the showcase mode, for example, which is kind of a cornerstone feature of this unit that just isn't available yet. So when that comes out, I'll make a video about it. I've also got a pretty sweet rig build planned for this, which will be its own video. So let's start with sort of the big likes, the big wins, if you will. First and foremost for me is form factor and user interface. The Stadium XL is quite a bit smaller than the original Helix, and that's great. We just don't need these units to be that big. They have slimmed down this unit where it needed to. It's very sort of tight and compact, but still usable. Like the foot switches are not too close together. The expression pedal is smaller, but still plenty big enough and doesn't feel like flimsy or cheap in any way. But the biggest win here is this touchscreen. Over the last week, I've been dialing in and building my own presets. I'll probably have some of them available for download pretty soon. This touchscreen is a massive upgrade over the original Helix for a few reasons. One, it's bigger, it looks better, it's higher resolution. The touch feature is very, very usable. It's fast, it responds incredibly quickly. There's no sort of like missed touches or lag in the screen at all. It's fantastic. Also, it's got a matte finish. This is not a screen protector on here. This is the actual screen, and that is such a nice touch, especially when you're using this on stage and there's stage lights all around you. You're not going to deal with the glare. Even right now with this big overhead light that I have, it's hitting the screen and I can still read the screen perfectly well. That's a small thing, but a big thing. That's a quality of life thing that I really appreciate. The other thing is when you're dialing in your presets, you really don't need the desktop editor, which to me was a big thing that I relied on with the original Helix. Like, yes, you could pretty easily build your own presets on the unit itself and navigate and do what you needed to do. But now having the touchscreen and being able to just click and drag and do whatever you need to do, it's incredibly intuitive, it's fast, it's easy, and this has the HX Edit software, the Stadium XL Edit software over Wi-Fi, which is really nice. You don't have to connect this to your computer as long as this is on the same Wi-Fi network as your computer is. But I find myself just not using the desktop software because the user interface on the unit and programming the unit is so easy that you just don't need it. And related to that, the next big win is focus mode, which if you haven't seen the demos, if you click this little aperture icon down here, any block you're on, amp block, cab block, effects block, whatever, it brings up focus mode. Now, when I saw this in the original demos, I thought this was going to be a complete just gimmick. I was completely wrong. I use focus mode, I would say 60 to 70% of the time when I'm dialing in a sound. It's genuinely great. Now, there's two reasons why this is cool. One, if you're dialing in a sound and you're using a piece of gear that you're not super familiar with, let's say a type of amp that you've never really played and you see all the controls on the bottom, this is a good way to start. Oh, I'm looking for a punchy rhythm sound. Well, let me just drag the lens over to punchy rhythm, and watching the controls move in real time not only gets you to the tone you're looking for, but it also kind of shows you what's happening, right? Like what's going on under the hood of the amplifier or the effect to give you those sounds. And then you dial in to taste. And the other cool thing about it, especially with the effect blocks, like some of the fuzzes or some of the delays, for example, it's showing you sort of a graphical representation of what the effect is based off. Obviously, they can't use the actual sort of trade dress, the name and logo and actual design of the pedal, but they can sort of emulate it. And knowing what something is based off of, at least for me, kind of helps put it in context. As of right now, we can't change these sort of preset zones or areas, if you will. They've said that that's a feature that will be coming. And when that does get here, I think that's going to make the focus mode that much more useful. Another small but really useful quality of life upgrade too is the clip feature. Now this is not fully developed yet. There's still some stuff to grow into here, but if you're not familiar, you can basically have a pre-recorded clip either from line 6 or eventually one that you program yourself, record yourself, that will play for you while you're dialing in your sounds. Now, obviously you can sort of already do this if you use a looper block, but this is a really cool feature, especially when you're going through the stock presets, which we'll get to in just a second. So how does it sound compared to the old Helix? Is this a massive upgrade? In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. Some of the newer amp blocks, the Agora amp blocks that I've played, the models that I've played, do genuinely sound and feel better than the stock Helix amp blocks did, the equivalent amp models did in the original Helix. I think one of the biggest areas of improvement too is in the cab block. Again, like using the focus mode, being able to see what cabinet you're playing and see the mic position and what mic you're using is great, but I do think the cabinets just sound better. I don't think you need to rely on impulse responses as much like you did with the original Helix. So it does sound better in those ways, but in other ways, I'm not noticing a huge improvement. Some of the gain blocks, for example, the overdrives, distortion, and fuzzes, to me kind of sound like they did in the Helix, which is okay. Not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Some of them, like the Kinky Boost, I use all the time, or the Alpaca Rouge is another favorite. That still sounds great. But I think some of the fuzzes and some of the distortions leave a little bit to be desired. And then aside from that, a lot of the effects that are in here seem to be just carried over from the original Helix. As of right now, the 1.1 release, some of that stuff is just kind of like the same. And the same goes for some of the amp models. You can tell that not every amp in here has been agorified, if you will. They're just sort of carried over from the original Helix. Sounds a lot better in some cases, and in other cases, it's pretty much the same. Okay, so one of the biggest improvements I think they've made here is in the stock presets, and that is that they're actually usable now. If you're coming from the old Helix, you know that the stock presets were basically just something to skip over and not pay attention to. They just kind of took up space on the unit. But that's not necessarily the case here. This is one of the stock presets called Brit Mega Guitar. It's basically like a Marshall, 100 watts super bass kind of preset. And if you go over to the snapshots, you'll see whoever made this preset gave you a lot of options. And this is really cool for a few reasons. One, a lot of these stock presets being usable means that you can use them as like a jumping off point to build your own kind of sounds. Like some of the settings in here, these snapshots are not something that I would use. Like this ambi lead patch is like way, way, way too reverby and delay. Like that's way too much. But there's some other cool stuff in here, like the clean dotted eighth sound is great. So we'll just go to the drive preset right now. We'll turn off the Klon, leave the plate reverb on. So basically we're just hearing the amp now with a touch of EQ, and we have a little bit of compression happening here. One cool thing that I like is with any of the compressor blocks, if you pull up the focus mode, you can see your gain reduction. So this is your output meter here on the right. And you can see if you're getting any gain reduction here on the left side. That's really helpful. You don't have to just rely on your ear to see how much compression you're getting. I like that feature a lot. If we go back to the amp block, this is one of the new Agora models, and it sounds great with one caveat, which I'll explain in a second. It's not bad. It's a pretty good clean sound. Again, it's not all, super inspirational and usable, but the way I've been doing this is just kind of like drag over to a sound I like, in between driven and Lemmy Smash there, for example, and then start dialing into taste. So there you go. That's kind of how I've been using the focus mode to sort of get a quick sound pulled up. Now, there's one issue that I've been having pretty consistently with this unit, and it's with gain staging. You're probably not going to be able to tell in the video because I will have to fix this in post. But right now, the unit is really, really quiet. And I've noticed this with most of the stock presets. They're just really quiet. And if you look at the level here, that's minus 14 dB. And most of them are like that. They're turned down quite a bit, which is fine, except for the fact that, I'm going into a pair of outboard studio preamps here, like I always do. And I'm having to crank the input of the preamp pretty high to even get sort of a moderate level out of the Helix. And if I go to the matrix mixer here, I'm going through the XLR outputs and I've got the output turned all the way up. It's weird. The gain staging here is kind of throwing me a little bit because now I'm not sure where I should get the gain from, where I should get the output level from. So with an amp block, your level control doesn't affect the gain or the amount of distortion coming from the amplifier. It's just output level. But if I start to bring this up, it's going to impact all the effects down the line. It's going to start to hit all these other effects harder, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's starting to change like the gain staging element. You can also boost your level on the actual output of the unit there. So far, that's been my biggest complaint is the gain staging. The presets, specifically the stock presets, sound really quiet out of the box, and I'm finding myself having to gain everything up. And what that means is there's discrepancies in output between presets. It's really difficult to get each different preset at the same volume. So if I leave everything at normal, then I'm having to crank my mic preamps really high, higher than I normally would to get the level out. So that is a weird sort of quirk. Maybe it's a software thing, maybe it's a user error thing. But there's one thing I want to focus on here with the Agora amps, and that is the hype control. This was another thing that I thought might just kind of be a gimmick, but I'm actually finding it quite useful. So in this preset, the Brit Mega Guitar preset, they've added, 3.7 hype. And what's cool here is if you click on any of these things, it'll actually give you a description of what's happening. So there's a write-up of your hype control, Z, pre, post. So what it's doing essentially is when it's off, it is full-on accurate. They're leaning on what is the most accurate sound of the amplifier, warts and all. And with an old Marshall like this, if you've ever played a Plexi, a super lead or a super bass, you know that they're not the most pleasing sounding amps in the room. There's a lot of harsh and pretty gnarly frequencies in there. The sound of a Marshall that we have in our head a lot of times is mixed and compressed and massaged and in the context of a song. It's not actually what the amp sounds like in the room. So what they've done to try and kind of get you closer to that sound in your head is give you this hype control. So when it's off, this is supposed to be the most accurate sound possible. And having played a bunch of Marshalls, that feels correct. I can get a little bit of that, what people call the kerrang, or there's that kind of really harsh, biting, nasally top end. That's why I'm playing a Strat or a Silver Sky, but it's a Strat. Listen to what happens if I turn the hype control up, though. Obviously at the high end there, it really shifts the EQ, but it's also adding some compression. I'm feeling the amp respond differently. It's not just an EQ control. There's more going on underneath the hood that impacts the feel of the amp model, not just the sound. As I went from 0 to about 5, that harsh kind of kerrang and bite gets subdued a little bit. The amp gets a little more compressed, a little warmer sounding. I think the hype control is actually very cool, and I commend them for doing this. So overall, this is a pretty major step forward, not just for Line 6 and Helix, but I think the guitar modeling space in general. I think Line 6 is doing stuff here that other big brands are going to have to mimic in order to stay relevant with the next generation of amp modelers. I'm looking at Neural DSP, Axe Effects, certainly Kemper. It's a step up where you would expect it. It sounds better. The amp modeling is more realistic and better. There's more CPU. It's faster and easier to use, all that kind of stuff. But to me, the interesting part here is that Line 6 seems to be taking a step in a direction that's not just making it sound more realistic. Because quite frankly, for a long time now, amp modelers and profilers have sounded more than good enough for guitar players to use them live and on record. And to me, this is why this sort of like arms race of, each new generation of modelers sounding better and having, more DSP or the ability to capture amps better. At this point, it's kind of pointless to me. And this is where the showcase feature gets interesting. Now, I don't have showcase set up yet. I haven't used it yet. I don't have an opinion on it, but from what I've seen and what I've talked to Eric Klein and the Line 6 team about, this is going to be big. Their whole sort of ethos with Stadium XL is that they want to sort of lower the barrier to entry for musicians and bands who are trying to go out and play live in 2025 and beyond. For years now, we've seen artists utilize things like Ableton Live or playback rigs to be able to sort of augment their live shows. You can tell that Line 6 is directly trying to work towards a solution for those players. See, now this is more than just an amp modeler or an effects processor. It's now an even better practice tool. The idea of being able to load in songs and have them assigned to presets and be able to mix yourself in. And then for the live musician, with the I/O options you have on the back, with the matrix mixer on 3 different outputs, and the showcase mode, this now goes beyond just being like a guitar sort of processing unit to now being kind of a pretty serious centerpiece for a live show or in a studio setting. If showcase mode ends up being as useful and as good as it looks like it can be, I could see this replacing Ableton playback rigs and laptop rigs for a lot of bands out there, both big and small. It could be handling the guitar processing, the bass rig, and doing playback and switching lights and switching effects, both in the unit and outboard, and having all that stuff essentially be on rails for just the cost of one unit. That's very, very cool. And I commend Line 6 for thinking of it that way. Again, I spoke to Eric Klein directly about this. This was a driving force. It's directly from his mouth. This is what they wanted to do, is lower the barrier to entry for young musicians and young bands to be able to go out and play live and deliver a compelling live show without spending a ton of money, thousands of dollars on laptops and playback rigs and in-ear monitor systems and everything. The Stadium XL doesn't completely eliminate the need for all of that stuff. It just kind of helps fill in the gaps. It can be more than just the guitar player's rig or the bass player's rig. So what's my plan for the Stadium XL? In case you missed the announcement, I landed a new gig. I joined the Midnights live band, and starting in January, I'm going to be going out on tour. And the first run that I'm doing with the Midnight is going to be in Asia. We're going to China, India, and Australia. They're all fly dates, and I need a fly rig. So the plan as of right now is to make the Stadium XL my sort of main fly rig for Midnight stuff moving forward. It's not going to be the sort of like main full fat touring rig for the US tours and the domestic tours. It's going to be the fly rig, but it's going to be more than just the unit itself. I'm still sort of figuring things out in my head, but one of my favorite things about this so far has been how easy it is to integrate some of my outboard effects. That's going to mean basically a hybrid rig. It's going to be the Stadium XL with a few outboard pieces, as well as driving some kind of backline amp on stage. I'm not going to have a silent stage and just run to front of house. I hate doing that. I think it sounds terrible. Like I said, I'm still wrapping my head around that. There will be a video coming on this in a few weeks. So to wrap up, who is the Stadium XL for? And if you are a current Helix user, should you upgrade? I think this is going to be a flagship centerpiece unit for people that need something with this kind of capability. Personally, I think Stadium XL now takes the cake over something like Quad Cortex, for example. I think the new sounds are fantastic. I think the I/O options are better than Quad Cortex. Showcase mode, like I said, is promised to be pretty insane. If you're mostly an at-home player who's looking for just sort of one unit to kind of do everything, I think this is also a pretty good option. Again, looking at that showcase mode, if it does what it says it's going to do, I think it's going to be a really, really cool piece of kit for practicing and playing both silently or through a great sound system or through an amplifier. I mean, it's really flexible and really versatile. However, if you're someone who is sort of modeler curious and you're kind of coming from a traditional guitar amp and pedal board background, and you think you might just want something to occasionally play around with or play with silently at home, or you just don't think this is going to be like a centerpiece thing for you, I'd probably skip it and I'd go with something either less expensive or a series of plugins, something that's just not as much money. If you're coming from OG original Helix to Stadium, should you upgrade? Maybe, maybe not. Again, if you are the type of Helix user where it's not your main rig, it's not your main piece of gear, it's something you use occasionally or when you need, or you just use it to kind of augment something, then I think Stadium XL probably isn't worth the upgrade for you. If you're someone who thinks like, yeah, the showcase mode and those other features are cool, but you know you're not going to use it, and you're happy with the sounds that you're getting out of your current Helix, just hold on to it. My guess is that Line 6 is going to continue to update it, at least for the foreseeable future. They're going to continue to add features and support that system because they've sold so many of them that they kind of have to, I think, at this point. The original Helix still sounds phenomenal. It's still incredibly useful. And again, if you're not going to use these newer features like showcase mode, for example, I just don't know that you need to upgrade. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comment section down below. Join the Discord server as well. There's a lot of talk about Helix Stadium XL going on over there. I'll have a sign up link in the description box down below. Don't forget, you can also get 50% off the Tone Course bundle. More information is in the description box down below there. Great way to support my channel if you appreciate what I'm doing. I'll also have an affiliate link to the Stadium XL if you want to check one out. If you purchase anything through that link, it helps me keep this channel going, so I greatly appreciate it. My name is Rhett Shull. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you real soon with another video.